I'm Lucy Parker and I work on Syriac manuscripts and on questions of religious identity and in particular about conversion from the Eastern Christian churches to Catholicism. The manuscript I'm going to be talking about today is CCM 12, that is the 12th manuscript in the collection of the Chaldean Cathedral in Mardin. Mardin is a multicultural historic city in modern-day southeastern Turkey. CCM 12 is an early 18th century manuscript. It seems to have been copied in phases between 1705 and 1719. It's quite a long manuscript at 294 folios long, and it's written in a combination of Syriac and Karshuni, that is, Arabic language in Syriac script. I first became interested in this manuscript because it seems to contain the autograph, that is the author's own copy, of a biography of Yausep I, the first patriarch of the new Chaldean church founded in the late 17th century. And the author and scribe of the biography and manuscript was Abdul-Ahad, one of the bishops from Yausep's church. And in the biography, he presents Yausep as a living martyr for the Catholic faith who experienced considerable tortures in defense of the faith, which he describes in some detail. And he also describes how God performed miracles for Yausep as a sign of his sanctity. And the manuscript also contains various other religious polemical texts teaching Catholic doctrines. But as well as these polemical and religious texts, the manuscript also contains some quite personal accounts related to Abdul-Ahad himself and to his family. So the first text in the manuscript is an account which Abdul-Ahad wrote of a pilgrimage which he made to Jerusalem in 1707-8. And this text, which was discovered and catalogued by one of my colleagues, contains a lot of quite personal details. So Abdul-Ahad lists all the places that he stopped in on his way to Jerusalem. He describes all the sights he saw while he was there, and we get some quite vivid snapshots. So for instance, he tells us that he was travelling in a ship towards Jerusalem. He got incredibly seasick for several days and eventually had to be carried off the boat by the sailors. But also in the manuscript, Abdul-Ahad records details of a plague which afflicted his village and his family in the year 1712. And he lists the members of his own family who very sadly died in this plague, including some of his children, his wife, and his nieces and nephews. He tells us that he himself fell sick, but did ultimately recover, but he was still unwell and leaning on a stick when he had to bury his own children. So he uses the manuscript to record important events in his own life and also in the history of his family. We also know that this manuscript was passed down within his family. There are various ownership notes on the first folio of the manuscript, and one of these reports that in the year 1744, the manuscript was owned by Shemes, that is Deacon Michael, son of Matran, that is Metropolitan Archbishop Basilios. Now we know that Basilios was the name which Abdul-Ahad the scribe himself used as bishop, and we know from the plague account that he had a son called Michael. So certainly this note showed that the manuscript was owned by Abdul-Ahad's own son. It was passed down by the scribe to his son within the family. But we can go further than this. Another note towards the end of the manuscript records that the manuscript was bought by a certain Ishaq, son of Ibrahim, and it was bought from the son of Michael. So it was bought from the grandson of the original scribe. Abdul-Ahad passed it down to Michael, who passed it down to his own son. And also towards the end of the manuscript, we find another plague narrative recounting a second wave of illness that hit the same family in the year 1771. And we hear about more deaths within this family, sadly, including Michael's son Yausep and his daughter Mariam. So we don't know who wrote this second plague account. The author doesn't name himself, but it seems likely to be another member of the same family who almost, in a sense, updated this family history, this archive, although he was writing several generations after Abdul-Ahad. I think this manuscript has a twofold significance for our field of study. First, it's very important to scholars of religious history and in particular of the new Chaldean church. It lets us see what kinds of texts a bishop from this movement chose to copy and to write. But what the manuscript also does is it gives us insights into the importance of family, something which actually doesn't often come across in the kinds of very fragmentary material we tend to study. So for instance, we'll often know the name of a scribe, maybe the name of his father, but it's very hard to put that into any kind of broader context. But in this case, because as well as these religious, sometimes polemical texts, Abdul-Ahad also records this personal information about his family, and his descendants carry on doing this, the manuscript almost serves as a family archive, and we're therefore able to unite broader discussions of religious change and community identity to much more personal stories of individuals and their families.